So I know when I'm in a darkest place that I have full authority. It doesn't faze me. Mm-hmm. People have a faith, but probably never cross the door of a church. We try and do church with them where they are. So I used to take a cross and a candle, do a service really in a crack house or a massage parlour, or try and bring the light of Christ where they are and turn that place into a place of worship.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gildo with Inspired. Great to be back for another fantastic week. If you're new to us, basically, I'm so sick and tired of being bombarded with bad news and a fear narrative and stuff that just induces anxiety. And Inspired is all about coming against that in terms of introducing you to a range of my mates, friends of mine who've done all sorts of different crazy stuff, be it in England or across the planet. Actually, this week's is a mixture of in England and across the planet because we got with us Ali Fenning. Welcome, Ali.
Hi, Simon. Good to be on here.
Yeah, so good to have you. Ali, I first knew as Ali Payne. It goes back, I think, 20-odd years. We were at All Nations Christian College together. Shout out to All Nations. Another fantastic alumni doing beautiful stuff in kingdom work. So listen, Ali, I don't know much about your childhood or your background at all, so let's just kick off. Go for it.
One of my first experiences of God was through reading Christian comics. Mm-hmm. And my mum and dad were sort of not necessarily going to church every week, but they were dipping in and out of the charismatic movement, 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So that's kind of what I grew up in. And I always remember mum taking me to a Bible shop in Bournemouth where we lived and buy me, she'd buy these proper books and I'd just look around, I think these comics look great. So I'd have them. And a lot of the ones I chose were all missionary comics. And I'd read these comics, I'd think, wow, that's what I want to do when I grow up. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of steered the course of my life. Certainly steered a lot of my theology, which is great, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It shows you what you give children when they're little does stick. Yeah. So that sort of steered where I went on a bit of a journey with my life. And I had some encounters with God through the charismatic movement, which opened my eyes to healing at a very young age. So I've always just known that that's a thing. Mm-hmm. I would expect that. I had healings in my own life. I always remember at All Nations, as you talked about there, once I fell down the stairs and really kind of ruptured my tendons in my ankle. I don't know if you remember that. But anyway, I got some people to pray for me and that kind of got healed. Never had surgery or anything like that on it. I've always just expected that stuff. So that's the gem of my childhood, if you think about it like that. But it didn't, when I was sort of 17, 18, I kind of went off the rails quite a bit. I remember I was carrying this vision in my heart to be a missionary. And I went to a Bible college at the time to apply. And they said, no, we don't think you're called. We don't think you'd be able to do the work either, because I always struggled with writing and could do a lot of content. I understand a lot. It's just putting it on paper is a real challenge for me. So that was probably more about timing, but I got a bit offended and thought, right, stuff it, I'll go and do my own thing. Yeah. So I kind of hit the nightclub scene and everything that went with that and just openly denied God and was quite hostile to God or church or anything. It was just hurt, and hurt. What I learned from that is hurt can be really destructive. As it kind of stole 10 years of my life, if you know what I mean by that. Wow. And obviously I do recognise the Bible college was probably right at that time, actually. It wasn't the timing for me, but the way they delivered it could have probably been a bit better. Right. But when I came back to Christ, it was a little bit more dramatic than that. I remember being in a nightclub in Bournemouth. Walking in, I was obviously thinking inside about God a bit and thinking, I don't know how much longer I can keep pace with drinking. I was drinking every day, in the mornings, in the evenings, in the afternoons, just when's the next drink coming? Mm-hmm. And thinking either I'm going to end up in jail, probably, for going too far, in a bit of fighting and, I was very aggressive and quite angry, or I'm going to be dead from putting too much of this stuff in my body. So I asked a group of blokes at the bar, what do you think about God? Have you heard about Jesus? What do you think about him? My friend was like, are you nuts? What are you doing? And I was like, no, really, this is a question I'm thinking about right now. So even in the middle of all that chaos, I recognise now that God still had a hand on my life and was leading me back to himself. And I think, a while later, a few weeks later, probably I came back one night, 4:00 in the morning, couldn't face life anymore, thought I just need out of here. I thought, I know, I'll pray. I'll ring my mum. It's the first thing I did, because I knew that she'd understand. And she said to me, she spoke very directly to me, if you do not give your life to Jesus, you're going to be dead. Do you want to pray this prayer with me? So I was like, all right. So I prayed this prayer with her. She led me in this prayer. And then I've put the phone down, I got on my knees and said, God, if you're real, sort my life out. And went to sleep that night, which was Saturday night, got up the next day and then went down the local Anglican church thinking, right, I belong here now. It was literally like that.
Extraordinary.
And I knew that I wanted to just, when I was in the church, just hear the preacher. I was always been interested and had a strong connection with the Word of God, the Scriptures. I thought, I just want to hear him. I don't want to meet anybody. I don't want to sing. It's not my bag. I want to hear what you've got to say. And that I did that for a good few weeks before talking to anyone, really. Just sat at the back quietly, listening to the preacher. At home was getting my Bible out, reading, really connecting in.
Wow.
So that's kind of how that I reconnected back with God, really.
I love it how God's just got his hand on our lives, and I'm sure your parents praying for that lost decade.
Yeah.
Now, what did your mates make of you?
They thought I was crazy. No, they just tried to every which way get me back out, on the town and on the razzle. Because what I've learned about that culture is, you're good while you're in the game. So as soon as you stop drinking and being a source of finance, maybe in some ways, then you are no longer part of that world. So very quickly they sort of ditched me, really. But I also had to make some dramatic changes. I had to make some decisions. These people are no longer my friends because it's destructive relationships for me at that time.
Yeah.
And that was quite painful. But I knew I needed the separation from that scene, really. Otherwise, probably I might have gone back to it. I don't know. Because the peer pressure's big.
Yeah. So, how did it play out then?
Yeah, so a few months later, I think 3 months later, I was on a plane to Africa. Yeah. The vicar kind of said to me, your life's a bit of a mess. We're going to Africa. Would you like to come? We're going for a month. We'll help you go, but we think it'll do you good. I was like, yeah, totally, I'm in. So that's what I did. I went to Uganda and worked on this building site. We built some houses, I think, and loved it. Loved every minute of it. It was like a work party thing. So while I was on the site, I just really spoke to Ugandans about their faith and just tried to glean some stuff of how they lived. Because obviously I had major culture shock, which Bridget told me about. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't rested for over 10 years. My body was messed up. So, and they have a little siesta in the middle of the day because it's so hot. I thought, this is great. I've never done this. And there were just little things. And, at lunch we'd pray. Every mealtime we'd pray. It was just like a month of retreat. And it really, I think it healed my life and set me on a course of reconnecting with that missionary call. Yeah. So that's what happened next, really. I came back and I was living with someone at the time, so that I wrote to them from Uganda and said, our relationship's over. I'm pursuing God and I'm pursuing a different life, unless you want to pursue God with me. And he didn't, sadly. So that changed. And then I helped the church do youth work. They said, we think you need to be on a youth work team. I was like, I don't think so. I'm terrible at anything like that. My life's not sharp enough for that by any means. And they said, no, it'd be good for you. And I really enjoyed that. And it built confidence in me and gave me a bit of responsibility. Yeah. So it was really good for me. And then every year I led missions teams back to Uganda, Food for the Hungry.
Okay.
So I did that for a few years, led short-term teams in the summer. And again, all the time I was asking God, is it time to come here? Is it time? What do you want me to do? What's the next step, really? And, how I was going to move out to Uganda and then that door suddenly shut quite abruptly. And I knew I couldn't go, which was quite painful. But that's how I came to be at All Nations. Instead of doing that, I thought I'll get some mission training.
Right.
So God led me there.
Yeah. So that's where we met. And I don't think you said you struggled with academia stuff and sort of dyslexic, which is really
massively
really encouraging that you've written a number of books now that God can use dyslexic people to write and inspire people, can't he?
Incredibly. But I've just learned, like a few weeks back, that actually a group of people who'd in a church, they've been trying to reach them for ages, and I went to this church. I thought, right, I'll give them these books because just to say thank you for supporting some of the work we do in Rwanda. And anyway, out of them reading the books and my vulnerability in the books, they then started going to prayer meetings. Mm-hmm. These people that are unreached. And I'm like, wow, really? It's just incredible. Brilliant. How's that?
Yeah.
So God does use everything for good.
Yeah, yeah. You know? What were your key takeaways then from All Nations?
Oh, I think the key takeaways were think clearly about what you do and the impact on the communities that you reach into. You know, like immersing yourself in communities and things like that. And it's about longevity. Mm-hmm. And I think the other one is the inspiration of people from all walks of life. And the massive friendships that we've all kept up is incredible. We all kind of get each other and get it, what we're up to. Mm.
And you talk about being called to the darkest places. Let's unpack that.
Yeah. So I was in a friend's house one night, house sitting while they were away, and I had quite what I would call a power encounter. So where I believe the Holy Spirit just visited me, and in an exceptional way. Mm-hmm. And I was lying in bed and I suddenly heard this knocking on the door downstairs. And I thought, I'll go and see who that is. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I went down, there's no one there. So, okay, go back to bed. So I went back to bed. Happened again, I went down. And this happened 3 times. Went back to bed. And then suddenly this bright light came through the window. I was upstairs, like really bright light, like white, searing light. I can't almost describe it to you. And out of the light came a voice. And it said, I'm calling you to the darkest places in the world. Wow. And I was like, wow, this is terrifying. Because you're thinking, your mind is thinking this isn't real, but actually it is really happening.
Was it a dream? Was it actually
I was awake.
Audible voice?
I was awake, fully awake. Yeah, it was an audible voice.
Wow.
And like I said, it was quite terrifying. You think, what's going on? And then it was like somebody plugged me into the electric socket. And I knew, I just lay there really still, because if I touch something, I know, if I touch a wall, I know it's going to fall over because this is so powerful. Just lie still. And I must have laid still for about 20 minutes, just thinking, don't move, don't touch anything, you know. And I drifted off into sleep from that place, but I woke up in the morning thinking, wow, that was something. And it kind of steered my direction of calling, I think. Mm-hmm. So I know when I'm in a darkest place, and that can be anything that is difficult, that I have full authority. That's what I believe that power encounter was about. Authority and just, it doesn't faze me. Mm-hmm. Those dark situations don't faze me. I just think, okay, this is interesting. What we're going to do here, God. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I'm called to the darker places. And I think, that's got my name on it. I'll go and do that. Which has been incredible over the years to see that work out, really. Yeah. Come to pass, if you like.
Well, go on, plunging in straight in there. Give us stories, anecdotes of times when, you have walked in that authority and seen His power unleashed. Yeah,
so I think one of the most profound times, which is also one of the most disturbing times, with the Ipswich murders. I'm running a chaplaincy to women who work in the streets in Ipswich at that time.
What year are we talking, and how many ladies were killed?
So 5 ladies were killed, and it was 2006.
Right.
And I started the ministry in 2004 by prayer walking, really, for a good 6 months to a year, and joining with another couple that were doing that sort of outreach. And then we kind of just did it together a little bit, and then I started to just carve my way in, because what I started to see was I was really starting to connect with those women.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought some people on team, just built a team and started to really get stuck into it. And then the murders started to happen. I remember the day that the police rang me up and just said, you need to know that we think we've got a serial killer on our hands. I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, then we'll keep going, because we need to keep the relationships that we've got. And actually these women that we've made, good relationships with could be about to die. Mm. So what that did really, that period really sealed that ministry in quite deeply with the women. Mm-hmm. So, we were giving them lifts places. We were like bringing them up every day. Where are you? We're still out on outreach, but from a van. It was an incredible time. It was a powerful time, yet a really sad time as well. Mm. But after it, once they caught him and things settled, those relationships were really deep. Mm. So some are still retained today. Mm-hmm. And we still do an element of that work, just a bit wider in Suffolk now. Mm. And obviously that then went on to off-street, working in off-street premises as well as on-street. So, visiting massage parlours and things and praying with people who are working in that industry, and also praying with the men that visit there. Yeah. Which is just incredible. You never expect that. Mm. It's like, so, incredible times and seasons. That was a really dark season, I think. But we took the light in. Yeah. And the power of Christ in,
And did you see sort of tangible gospel fruit?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. A lot of the women have a faith. Yeah. People have a faith, but probably never crossed the door of a church, because sometimes it's scary, isn't it? Yeah. It's scary for me, let alone for people. So it's a big ask. So we try and do church with them where they are. So I used to take a cross and a candle and do a service really in a crack house or a massage parlour, or try and bring the light of Christ where they are and turn that place into a place of worship. Mm. You can do that in their homes, wherever they are. Occasionally I'll take them out on ministry trips with me, and they've prayed for people. I've had them as a prayer ministry team, which is really good fun, because that's discipleship.
Yeah, love
that. So, it's incredible, really. Yeah. I've got one girl at the moment who's really connecting deeply with God, ringing me up at 10 o'clock at night, telling me that God's just spoken to her through the scriptures. Lovely. And telling me the scriptures. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? So you do see pockets of like little revival amongst people, is what I feel. Yeah. And that's when you want to sort of harness that and go a little bit deeper with them and help them move along on their journey, really.
Yeah, we work with a lot of prostitutes in Burundi, and I love taking my friends and introducing them to them, because prostitutes in general, well, you don't need to tell them that they're in a mess. So there's some of them are very hard-hearted, but some are very soft, very tender. And if they're open to God and if they've encountered God, then it's an incredibly sort of thin place where the presence of God is. And often I'll take my mates and then I'll say, just share a story, and they'll just start crying because they're in the presence. The Holy Spirit is there, and it's really beautiful. And of course, to those who've been forgiven much, they love much, isn't it? That's what Jesus said in Luke 7 to that lady who poured out her love and washed Jesus' feet with her hair. That's one of my favourite passages in the Bible, that Luke 7. Yeah. So that is part of your work. I don't know about the chronology. Give us more stories of where God's used you.
Yeah. So also in Rwanda. Mm-hmm. I've been working into Rwanda for the last 20 years. And I was doing a church leadership conference in Kigali, in more of a Muslim quadrant of Kigali, actually. And the place means no good ever comes from here, is the name of the town.
Right.
And I didn't know that at the time, but anyway, worked with a little church there, Church of God's People, and was doing this leadership conference, and suddenly there was this big fight outside. So I was like, what's going on out there? And there was like 20 women chasing another woman. Mm-hmm. So I went outside and had a look, and the pastor came out and said to me, you should be out here. And I was like, what's happening? He said, they're all drunkards and prostitutes chasing another woman to beat her, and some of them were in prison later. And he was kind of laughing. I said, well, why don't we have a meeting with them tomorrow? Can you get someone to go and gather them? And we'll have a little tent meeting out here, because there's a tent outside the building. Mm-hmm. And I'll buy them a Coke and a cake and we'll have a chat. He's like, you're joking. I was like, no, let's do it. So we did this meeting and it was incredible. I loved it because I had two little agendas there. Really. One, I wanted to reach the women and hear their stories and think about how we might be able to do something there. And secondly, I wanted to impact the church with the community around them. I wanted to bring that community into the church and sort of change it up missionally a little bit. So I had a little bit two agendas there. And so anyway, I shared my story and listened to the women's stories. And I think we had 40 women in that meeting and about 35 of them came to Christ that day.
Beautiful.
Which was just really, really good. I said, if you come back tomorrow, we'll do some more. So they came back tomorrow and we did discipleship classes for like 5 days with them. Really. And the pastor, when I got home, he rang me. And he said, you left me with a very big problem. I was like, I know. I said, that was my intention. And I said, don't worry, we'll work through it together. So I said, ask the women what they would like to do. Is there something else they would like? Do they have a vision for their life? That kind of thing. And they wanted to do sewing, because they recognised they needed a different means of earning money to get them out of the poverty. So I said, okay, I think I've got faith to raise enough money for 10 sewing machines. If you find me a trainer, then we'll have a little training place, really. We'll see what God does with that. So we did that, and that year, I think 40 women we had on that programme that year, and they all graduated, and we were also able to give them a machine each. So they could set up a small business in their homes. And I've been doing that for 10 years now, every year with different women. The criteria is you've got to be working the street and an addiction to be on the programme. You've got to have a really hard time, if you like. And some of the stories are absolutely fantastic. We just graduated 10 women 3 weeks ago now. So... And we go around and we audit. When I go to Rwanda, I audit. I go and see them in their homes, which they're blown away by, that any white person would go and sit in their home in the first place. Like, well, of course I'm going to come and see how you are, and how it's going, and if we can help in any way, or is there, I'm testing to see if it's still working for them. So it's just amazing to see. It's very transformational for the whole family.
Tell you what, let me, I'll give you my best, my favourite of all our conversion and dramatic God at work stories, and then you give me yours. So ours is as Ange. So Ange is French for angel, and she was a sort of high-class, high-end prostitute who used to service the UN workers, obviously get paid more doing that. She'd been long, disowned and presumed dead by her family because, you don't last long in that trade because of HIV/AIDS. And she came on our project. She came to faith. She encountered Jesus. She really wanted her family to know that she was alive. She wanted to reconciliation. She wanted to share her faith. So she saved up money and she got on a bus. And we'd prayed, and the day before she was going up country into the bush to go back to her family. She'd fled from up country to come to the capital. The day before she got on the bus, her brothers, I don't know how this works, her brothers had a vision that an important guest was coming the next day, and they had to prepare a feast. So they prepared this feast, not even knowing who was coming, which is very weird. And Ange arrives, steps off the bus in her village, hears loads of dancing and drums, and then she looks across, and her eyes meet with her family's eyes, her brother's eyes, her parents, and they look at each other and it's you. And, beautiful modern day equivalent of Luke 15, isn't it? A parable of the lost son, daughter in this case. And there was much rejoicing and reconciliation. And she's a sort of jewel in God's crown. Lovely, lovely grace story. So, And I love it how, a number of these ladies, basically from the lowest of the low. No one, my daughter Grace, you ask any young girl, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one's going to say they want to be a prostitute, are they?
No,
it's
that's right.
always because they've just fallen through the cracks.
Yeah.
And it's a last resort, and yet so many have to resort to it. So there's no room to judge. We don't condemn, and people, those guys, those ladies particularly, are so ripe for relationship once you can, if the Lord can get through their hardened hearts and defences, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of our women, I was asking her how she came to be in that sort of industry, if you like. Because some of them say, yeah, I'm here, I'm a businesswoman. And I think, well, you are a businesswoman, but there are better businesses you could do for your overall health and well-being, do you know what I mean? So, but they are quite savvy. And she said she moved to Kigali, enticed by a man who offered her a job in a bar.
All right.
Which was a cafe bar. And she got to Kigali, and then he locked her in the back room. He raped her, and then said, now other men are going to do this to you, and this is what your job is. I was like, oh, wow, my goodness. And so, I mean, I don't know why I'm shocked by it. I was always shocked by the story. I thought, wow, it's just not the story that you would think, is it? And yet I think it happens more frequently. Young girls coming from the village looking for work. And she managed to escape. She fled and then got some shack where she lived. And yet because she understood that she could earn a bit of money because she was so poor, that's what she did. So I asked them as a group, the women, how much do you get a night? And they told me maybe 3,000 Rwandan francs, which is the equivalent of £3. I said, well, in the UK, I work with somebody who gets £1,000 a night. And they were like, what? And what I wanted to do was bring the equivalent there of like, actually, you're worth so much more in terms of there's no price on you, really. It's what you're doing is crazy. So I was just wanting to show that to them, the craziness of like, actually, it's not good for you because you're worth so much more, not in terms of finance, but in terms of being a person. There's no price on you, really. So that girl came on our program and has a small business and is doing very well. Where her esteem was so low, she's now a lot higher, and that's also what I love. We see that whole shift in people's self-esteem. Really.
Yeah. And I picture you working in prisons as well. Any prison stories?
I do in Rwanda and here. Loads actually. So I worked with Prison Fellowship in Rwanda quite a bit by going to look at their version of the sycamore tree. And whilst I was there, they said, would you like to speak to some prisoners? And I was like, okay. And then I walked through this door and there was 6,000 prisoners sat there, all perpetrators of genocide.
Which prison was that?
Others. It's the one in the main Kigali.
Okay, I've been there. Yeah.
The main prison, yeah. And I was just blown away. I was like, what, here, now? They're like, yes, now you preach. I was like, okay. Thought I need to start saying something because I was in shock. Like, okay, I didn't think it'd be like this. I thought it'd be a small group. So I just did a gospel message and many came forward for Christ. And also I was able to just sit and chat and hear the stories of how things had happened, and the sorrow and the grief in a lot of people was immense.
Yeah. From
that place, I remember that day going from that place and then going to a church way down in a little valley in Kigali, and they were survivors of genocide crimes down there, and they wanted prayer for healing, and you know how it is, in those situations. And so I remember putting my hand on a woman's head. I was like, oh my goodness, what's that on your head? Which is where, I took a blow to the head. I was like, oh wow. And it was just this overwhelming sense of grief and sadness and just that sense of, doing that on the same day was quite immense. But I think God was showing me something there that, there's a need for reconciliation. There's a need for understanding both sides of the story, which I kind of gleaned a bit that day more. My heart goes out to both of them, really.
Yeah. Again, it's just another cool story coming to mind, because this wasn't in Kigali's prison. This is in Gitarama, further down south, which I don't know if you've been there. But
I have been there. I have.
So, guys, if you're not familiar, Rwanda, because of the genocide, gazillions of prisoners from 1994 onwards, they wear these pink pajamas, basically, these pink uniforms, and they often work parties out in the hills. And anyway, so this is my friend Edith, and Edith is this beautiful lady. She must be about 65 now, and so when it kicked off on the 6th of April 1994, she rushed home, and her husband and 3 of her kids were already dead. I've been and cried with her by the graveside of those 4, but she still had 3 kids who are still alive. So she packed her things together. She tried to get through to relative safety in the Congo. She came to a roadblock in the Interahamwe, where the killing machete-wielding gangs stopped her. The guy knew her. He knew she was from the other tribe. He took her to the side of the road. He said he's going to kill her. She looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not afraid to die, because I know that as soon as you kill me, I'm going to be with Jesus." And he said, "No, God is dead." And I think you could easily believe that God was dead in 1994 in Rwanda. Yeah. I mean, a friend of mine said this is where 59 members of my family were hacked to death. So it was just a living hell. Anyway, he stripped her because he was going to rape her. But she said to him, she prayed in that moment, "Lord, if you are dead, then I don't want to die. So show me that you're alive." And as he stripped her to rape her, he found all her money stashed in her bra. So he took the money and he legged it, and the other killers legged it because they wanted a share of the spoils, if you like. And she was able to get dressed, get her kids through to the Congo. Now, fast forward a few months, she's back there, back in Nyanza, where she lives, and the local jail in Gitarama that was built for 1,000 men had 7,000 men in it. You know the deal.
Yeah.
Unless loved ones bring you food, you rot, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so she got permission from the head of the jail to go back and see that man who's going to rape her, who's going to kill her and her kids. And in this incredibly charged personal encounter, she's like, "Look at me. You told me that God was dead. Well, I'm here to tell you that he's alive, that he loves you, that he cares for you, that he forgives you, and he's told me to do the same. So I love you. I'm going to care for you. I forgive you. Now, what can I do for you?" And she carried on looking after him as a widow in a culture where, there's not exactly much social security system there. She's adopted 8 other kids. I mean, those are the jewels of faith. I find that so inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you got any other sort of mates of people you come across where you just think, what a level of faith, which is hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard for us in the Western world that are not put through such extremes to experience.
It is, yeah. I think one of the biggest stories was when I went to a prison fellowship prayer meeting, and this guy there, I went in, and there's 2 guys sat next to each other. One was as this guy had this massive pair of sunglasses, and I was kind of smiling to myself, thinking, they're way too big for you. You look really quite funny. And then he gave up and gave testimony that he'd killed the man next to him's wife and children. I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't know it was coming to this. And then the other guy next to him got up and said, "Yes, and I forgive you." And they embraced, and and I felt that was genuine. It was really genuine. And then so it's this prayer meeting, and who was leading the prayer meeting? The guy with the big sunglasses. And that just blew me away. I was like, "Whoa, well, you're the guy that killed them." He's like, and I think from a Western perspective, I cannot get my head around that. But it's really good, and it's really freeing, and it helps us with the things and the challenges that we here in the Western world go through. I think. Yeah. Those powerful stories. That's the most powerful one I've come across.
Before we shift to just hearing a bit about how your door opened to serve in India, anything else on Rwanda, that chapter you want to say? I know it's ongoing.
Yeah, no, I think it is an ongoing thing. This year we've done some other little projects, like in Rwanda. If your family have died and your children have died and your grandchildren are not around, then you are really on your own. And one of our friends in Rwanda, John, he rang me up and said, "I've got this old lady, she's about 86, she's got no family, I found her in her house, starving, dying, the rains are coming, her house is going to fall down, can you help me?" I'm like, I just felt God say, I think you should do something about this. So I chatted to some friends and was like, right, can you help us get a bit of money together? Can we help this lady get her house back? And can we buy some food and a few clothes and stuff? So there's pockets of times when God will highlight certain people to help, isn't it? And sometimes we have to work outside of our remit. Because I think, often my remit looks like I said, the darkest places, and sometimes I'm pigeonholed into prisons and women in prostitution. But actually, sometimes there's a bit of a missional margin, and you've got to step outside of that to go, yeah, let's do this. God's highlighted this. I don't know for what reason, but I feel to do this. And I think that's the ongoing story with Rwanda for me. There's the little pockets of things God is bringing up, different people and places. So I find that interesting.
Okay, so India?
Yes, India. So that came about 2 years ago. I had a Facebook message from somebody, and she said, can you help me? I'm Indian and I'm a missionary in Bangkok, and I'm reaching women on the streets in Bangkok. Can you help me do that better? So, okay. So I said, well, tell me what you're doing. And she told me, I said, well, I think you're doing great. Her name is Wansuk. And I said, I think you're doing really, really well, what you're doing now. And keep doing more of that. So she said, also, we have a Bible college in India, northeast India, and we run Sunday night Bible studies for missionaries who go to remote places and are often in quite a bit of danger and persecuted, and pastors who are part of persecuted church. Could you teach on that? I was like, I suppose so. I started to think at that point, I don't really know who you are. And I was waiting for this could sound dreadful, but we need some money for this. I thought, it's never come. It is real and it's genuine. I've been doing it for 2 years now, helping the persecuted church just go deeper in God, equipping them really for their outreaches and missions. So that's been incredible. And I've had to rethink loads of stuff because it's persecuted church. So you have to think differently in your teaching and your approach and everything else, and your missional ways of doing things, because it needs to be hidden. Otherwise, you're going to have your head cut off. So and there's some really bad stuff going on in that part of the world. Some of the teachings they put out across the world on YouTube into the Muslim world. And I've had a look. They're getting like loads of hits, and I'm like, what? So there's all these Muslims listening to some of these teachings. But that's how that door opened. This is why I want to share the story of it's crazy, because it came through a Facebook message of somebody I don't know. God's opened a different door there. So he does that from time to time, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Which is crazy, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey folks, most of you know that this comes out under the auspices of Great Lakes Outreach working in Burundi. I love the impact in our work, literally in the lives of hundreds of thousands of people through getting behind incredible local leaders involved in all sorts of work out in Burundi. Listen, I've got some great news, and that is that we've got an incredibly generous friend of mine who has put in £50,000 for matched funding of monthly giving over the coming year. So if any of you were loving the podcast and want to be involved in our work, if you, for example, chose to give £10 a month for the coming year, that £10 is literally double, becomes £20. If you had more money, we're giving 100, that become 200, whatever, including if you're already giving monthly, and whatever you increase that by, that will be matched for the coming year. What an opportunity. I'd love it if you want to consider that, and you could go to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired, and you could make that pledge there. Oh, be awesome. greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired if you want to be involved in that. And thank you so much for your support. Now let's get back to the podcast. Now you talk about sort of seasonal changes in ministry. How do you know when they're coming, and how do you shift?
Yeah. So I think there have been times in my life, looking back, when you start to feel a bit uncomfortable, or this is one of my number one things, is I start to feel a bit bored. I think, well, I need to change it up. I'm feeling a bit same old. And then it's capturing that question to God. Are you wanting us to change something? You want to shift here? Is there a different gear coming here? Is it time to lower the gear, or is it time to make it higher? Or is there a different place? And like an area that you're identifying. Sometimes I've been thrown into a seasonal change, and I think for me that's how that works the best. Otherwise, I may never do it.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, this year we've birthed a new ministry called Mission on the Move,
mm-hmm.
after the sudden closure of the last one, and I thought, well, either I put my feet up or I form something new.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the skills that I've learned over the years to have a go and see what God does with that. And so we were in quite a big shift change this year, really, of establishing what we've formed as Mission on the Move, which is a missional community, which my prayer is other people will sort of attach and come alongside and do their mission if they would like through the organisation. I've grown it slowly, intentionally, to try and get that ebb and flow there, so it's not all a response to the drama of the shift.
Mm-hmm.
So there's things like that you can do in seasonal change. You don't have to be dramatic. You can do it at a pace, and so you can listen to God and see what He's saying along the way. And I've also learned there's lots of offers on the way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tuning into the right one, and I think we'll always know intuitively what's in our heart and to do that. But there are definite seasons, like the seasonal change for me of Rwanda to India. It's tuning into those seasonal changes. Potentially you're doing this right now as well, thinking about next year already. What things would I like to be doing? What is God calling me to do next year? And it doesn't need to be a repeat of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And just exploring some of that. I think alongside the seasonal change for me was the fact that my husband became quite unwell,
mm-hmm.
and has had to go through cancer treatment, and that's ongoing, and that impacted everything.
Sure.
So rather than thinking everything's gone horribly wrong, I'm actually at the place where I'm thinking this is kind of highlighting the seasonal change.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes our circumstances do highlight where God's saying, you're changing it up a bit right now. And it's going to feel a bit uncomfortable for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But trust me within this is part of your seasonal change. And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's looking at everything that is going on in the context of a missional life at the time, and tuning into that and not being afraid to go with it, even though it feels a bit rough,
So you talk about your husband, that's Richard.
Yeah.
So he's, has he sort of just, you married him and he's like released you to do all your stuff, or how's it work?
Yeah, amazingly. Yeah, he has, yeah. So by trade, he's a farmer. So that means he's here a lot at home. And he's just released me over the years to do all the ministry, really. And I think with Mission on the Move, a nice thing is that we can now do this together and build it together, which was always part of our heart to do that. But whilst I was working for somebody else in their organisation, you can't do that stuff so much. So that's been great. And even though we've been under a lot of pressure, I've said to God, you're joking me that you want us to do this right now. Is this right or not? Because it's quite a big thing, isn't it? To ask of Rich, I know you're going through cancer treatment, would you mind if we birth our own ministry? That's mad when you look at it from a world perspective. But I felt it was the right thing to do. And so did Richard. He was like more up for it than me, really. So that's kind of what we're doing, really, and seeing how far together we can go with that.
Yeah.
And where God will lead us. I mean, he's a man of prayer, intercessory prayer. So whilst he was in at the Macmillan unit, I was like, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is my strategy to keep him in a good space. Took his iPad down and set up some online prayer meetings for him to lead from his bed while he's getting treatment, while he was quite ill, really. But I thought, I have to keep him in a place of faith and a place of being who he's called to be, because that's what will hold him in the day of trauma. Yeah. So that's what we did.
Brilliant.
So there's the top tip of the day.
Yeah.
Don't back off, push in a bit deeper.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and does that come into your latest book, Lift Up Your Head?
It does a lot. So the book Lift Up Your Head came from our Rwandan Freedom Project, the Women's Project. In lockdown, we kind of all had to do things online, didn't we, and stuff. I started zooming into their classrooms and doing discipleship classes with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept asking me these questions. How do we do this? How do you know this? So I thought, I'll write about it. So a lot of it is around building up your self-esteem, coming from poverty into a place of stability, how to break anxiety, how to break depression in your life. It's key things that actually, Richard read it and he said, actually, most people will be battling this stuff. Why don't you put it in a book, a bigger book for here in the UK too? Mm-hmm. So every woman who comes on our programme in Rwanda gets a copy of the book. And they love it. They loved it. They said to me, when I go home, I'm sad because I'm not with the group anymore. When I read the book, joy comes back to my heart. I'm like, wow, it's powerful. So I've extended the book for here and changed the stories a little bit for our culture here. But I think my prayer is that people will get free of the shackles that they don't realise are on them through the reading the book. Yeah, I just think God's going to use it. We're pumping it into prisons and rehab centres. And obviously when I'm out preaching quite a bit, I have it on our stall. So I think it's applicable to anybody who's just struggling in life a little bit.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll put that in the blurb. We'll put Mission on the Move in the blurb. You talked earlier about having experienced healing from a very young age. Have you got any sort of stories of God using you to see healing come in spectacular ways?
Yeah, so every time I'm out preaching or, teaching wherever I am, I'll always have healing as part of the response. So I'll always do prayer for the sick. That's sort of built into me, really. It comes from when I was in Uganda on that first missions trip. I preached my first sermon there. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I thought, right, I'll have a look at the Bible. Jesus, he seems to say some things and then pray for the sick, so I'll do that. Went to this Anglican church and did that. Shared some Bible stories and pray for the sick. People came forward and they got healed. They said, oh, I got healed, And I'm like, really? So I thought, okay, so that's just part of my DNA, if you like. And there's one lady that just blew me away. I was at a conference a good few years ago now, and a women's conference, and she was waiting at the back of the queue. And I was waiting to get food, really. I was like, I'm just so hungry, and the queue was really big. And I'd spotted this lady, and I thought, I really know I need to pray for her. And she came up to me right at the end, and she says, right, I've been waiting because God told me you're going to pray for me. I'm like, okay. And she'd got depression come on her from nowhere and couldn't handle it anymore. So I said, well, all I need to do is lay hands on you and ask the presence of God to come and heal you with his healing balm. So that's what I did. And then she sort of went off and said, thanks very much. And I thought, well, I don't know what that did or not. But anyways, a few months later, she came to another thing I was speaking at, and she said, you probably don't remember. I said, I do, I totally do. How you doing? She goes, yeah, I've come here just to tell you that God healed me that day.
Beautiful.
I was like, wow. So I was like, it's amazing, really. So God definitely uses the space that we give him. I think if we have, it's not about my faith, it's because it's about believing what Jesus says and that he's active, isn't it, in the world, so through us. So it's just about being faithful and praying for people and expecting the Holy Spirit to come and, do the work. So I always pray for the sick wherever I am. Even if I'm out on the street, I do it. I'm back twice about doing that.
Excellent. How about in Rwanda, any healing or just crazy stories that you can tell?
I think, one of the most powerful stories is I met with a lady. I chatted to her. She was quite a poor lady, and this is what I remember about her. She bought some eggs, and she started to say that she keeps having dreams that the dogs, the wolves, are chasing her and biting her. I thought, that sounds a bit odd. What's that about? So I said to somebody, what's this about? They go, oh, she's crazy. I'm like, I don't think she is. I think she's troubled. So I said, look, bring her here and let's have a pray with her and see what God does. So I asked her a few more questions around that. And it turns out she'd been through quite a bit of trauma with her family. And I said, I'm just going to pray because I think you need some healing in those areas of trauma. So I tend to see a lot of healings in emotional settings for people, really. So I prayed with her. And you know when you pray with somebody and you think, I don't think that's done any good. You go home and you're just wrestling with it. You think, I was back in the hotel room thinking, should have done this, should have done that. Anyway, I saw her the next day because she was at the women's meeting, and I said, how are you doing? And she looked different. She looked transformed, and she was there singing, dancing. I'm like, you're a different person. She goes, yes, I'm better, thanks. I'm like, wow.
I love that. Incredible.
Other people, physical healings. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people set free from addictions in Rwanda, with alcohol addiction. I have a thing with that as well, because mine was eventually a supernatural healing on getting free from alcoholism, because I couldn't quite nail it in myself. It was always a bit of a temptation. And I remember I started working in prison here in the UK, and I kept saying to God, I really need you to set me free of the desire for alcohol, because it's gonna be my downfall. I really need you to take this from me. And I went to America on a missions trip, and there was a little Filipino lady there that prayed for me. God had already spoken to her about me, and she said, it's okay, God's going to set you free on this trip. I was like, great, bring it, pray for me. And she prayed for me very gently, and I've changed that day. Never been the same since. So when I'm praying with people with addiction, I absolutely know that I have full faith that you can get that, immediate sort of release from that, the healing and deliverance in that area.
Amen.
So I pray for a lot of people in Rwanda who alcoholics, can't stop drinking because of the depression and the poverty and all of that goes with it.
Yeah.
And seen some amazing things through that.
Any last words, anything you feel like you should have said or haven't said yet?
Joe, I always remember you, Simon, being quite an inspiration to me, actually. When we were at All Nations, I don't know if you remember, I preached one Christmas time at the Christmas concert, I think. And then I had a little bit of challenge from the preach I did from some of the people there, which is fine. You're always going to have a little bit of that. But I remember chatting to you, and you just said to me, whatever happens, you should always just keep preaching and never quit. Always keep the faith and never quit preaching. Never keep sharing the gospel and find a way to do it. And so I think that was a real nugget for me. So if anyone is struggling or thinking, I can't do stuff, just have a go and see what God does with it.
Yeah.
And you'll find he meets you there. And it's not that we know how to do stuff, because often we don't. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing half the time, but I have a go.
Yeah.
And then God seems to build something with that. And then you get to the next level and you have another go. And so it's never quitting.
Amen.
And that's what I would want to say. Always keep preaching the gospel in any shape or form.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a good way to close. And I love it that you're doing that and God's used you to do that, to the thousands as well as to those one by ones on the streets of Ipswich or wherever. So God bless you, sister. Carry on doing it.
Thank you.
Listen, guys, if you've enjoyed this podcast, can you give us a great review on Spotify, iTunes? I'll put Ali's details in the blurb. You can be in touch with her. You can be in touch with me, simongilbo.com. or any of the social media platforms. I want to thank Adam Thomas Stiff. The editing might stand him in for the mixing. Next week, we're back with another fantastic guest. But in the meantime, have a good one and toodaloo.